So, you are in war with the ogres, and your party has just been encountered by the rot-toothed ogres. What you're gonna have to do is, in order to evade the ogres and escape, is roll a 15.
Jenna, come on, you can do it. Roll good, roll good. Oh man. Oh.
That is not a 15, so that means the ogres do surround you, and you guys get captured by the ogres. Unfortunately, you get tied up and they're taking you away to their prison. Sorry, guys.
Well, as long as they treat me by the Geneva Convention, we should be fine.
What's the Geneva Convention?
What? Can we pause?
Yeah, I'll allow.
How do you not know about the Geneva Convention?
I don't know.
Well, let me take you on a journey.
Guys? Jenna, what did you do?
Long story short, you were there, now you're here. Now pay attention. The Geneva Convention was written through debate and diplomacy several times in history. The Geneva Convention discussed what people at war should do when capturing other nations' military personnel, medical personnel, and non-military civilians.
Basically, the Geneva Conventions are a set of rules that tells the countries at war how to treat each other, specifically the wounded and the captured, and even civilians that might get captured. They are signed in Geneva, Switzerland, by representatives of several countries between 1864 and 1949. Which is the great thing about the Geneva Conventions. It's an ongoing process. The countries that participate continually debate, and eventually they decide on rules that we must follow during a conflict.
It's unfortunate that we have conflict at all, but the diplomacy born from each conventional gathering brings us closer and closer to peace. Imagine having leaders from several countries in a room trying to come to a consensus on a myriad of issues. Each country holds their own values and morals. Each country might have a dozen different views on a single issue.
These treaties were ultimately recognized by 194 nations, essentially the countries of this world. Probably the greatest diplomatic achievement ever, in my opinion.
In about 1859, a Swiss man, I think his name was Henry Dunant, was surprised to see a bunch of hurt soldiers after a fight that surrendered with no one to give them help. And from this, the Red Cross was born. The Red Cross has a unique position under the Geneva Conventions. As a completely neutral and independent organization, the International Committee of Red Cross can act as a neutral instrument of humanitarian protection and armed conflicts. Although there was great debate amongst policymakers, this was the first time heads of state came together on the medical rules of soldiers during wartime. A way they applied these rules is that the states enforced the rules through their national legal systems, diplomatic channels, or international dispute resolution mechanisms. Can you imagine if the first Geneva Convention didn't come to an agreement through debate and diplomacy? There might not have been a Red Cross.
How did this happen? Ah! What just happened?
I just transported you through time and space.
How?
I'm a magic user.
In Dungeons and Dragons?
I'm just trying to teach you about the Geneva Convention.
You know there's Google, right?
But I have more to tell you.
Not again.
Welcome to World War II. It was from this war that the Geneva Convention came together again. Anyway, policymakers forgot a very important fact. Bomb! The other conventions forgot to include the protection of civilians or non-combatants. Luckily, they addressed that in the 1949 convention after World War II.
Before 1949, the Geneva Conventions were only concerned with combatants, not with civilians. After World War II, people realized that the consequences of not protecting civilians was a massive mistake. The convention adopted in 1949 takes account of the experiences of World War II. The majority of those conventions deals with the treatment of protected persons, and it demonstrates the obligation of occupying forces over civilian population, and it has provisions on humanitarian relief like the Red Cross.
Combat can yield many consequences which can encompass civilian populations. Because of the 49 conventions, compassion and proper treatment of civilians was introduced. It's easy to forget that the wars affected civilians so much, especially with what the world endured during World War II. People were uprooted, cities destroyed, all the while without any real protection under the conventions. That's what was addressed in 1949.
And this diplomatic achievement continues year after year due to the evolving nature of conflict in our world and the tools used to engage in that conflict. New tools and concepts such as urban warfare, cyberspace, remote, and other new weapons all require these Geneva Conventions to continually be reviewed and updated. But it all comes back to the basis for the original Geneva Convention in 1864, and that is we must place limits on the suffering.
Some of the things that it said was prisoners of war must be shown respect at all times, allowed to notify their family, given adequate food or clothing, given medical care, they had to be paid for any work that they do, and they had to be released and sent home when the war is over. At this point in time, the convention only had to do with the hurt soldiers that were in the war, but they weren't actually fighting. The Second Geneva Convention worried about those who were hurt at sea. And the third was in about 1929 that covers the military personnel who fall into enemy hands.
Oh no. Stop that, I don't like it.
But what'd you think?
I don't know, was this the only time the Geneva Convention happened?
I'm glad you asked.
Oh no.
Well, actually, there were 4 Geneva Conventions. Some things that they talked about was how the laws applied to the war.
The Geneva Conventions are recognized the world over as the seeds of international humanitarian law. Since 1859, the rules set forth by the conventions have saved countless lives in hundreds of conflicts all over the world. Over 70 years later, they are still the most relevant set of laws created through debate and diplomacy to aid in protecting humanity from itself during war.
The rules of the conventions really speak to the balance we have tried to find as a people when it comes to military conflict and our own humanity. The convention's rules even apply to any internal conflicts within a country, which was a big win in 1949. All told, the Geneva Conventions have fostered our ability to get back to more permanent peace by alleviating the devastating consequences conflicts can bring. Humankind wants to live in peace. We have the earnest want deep down, but we also don't always agree.
The Geneva Conventions remain the centerpiece or the cornerstone for protection and respect for all people in times of war and armed conflict.
It was the interpretation of these laws that sparked the most debate during the conventions. Different countries had varying opinions of what the Geneva Convention rules applied. Some countries didn't even take part in the convention, and the debates raged on. It's basically the government saying, hey, you guys can't just do whatever you want to these people.
Okay, just stop.
So that's the Geneva Convention in a nutshell.
I think I get what the Geneva Convention is about.
Okay, so now that we got all that settled, what do y'all want to do?
What?
You know you're still in prison, right?